Hello everyone and welcome to Sunup. I'm Lyndall Stout. Oklahoma livestock producers who were using dual-purpose wheat this winter to graze cattle are starting to scout for first hollow stem. For more, here's Sunup's Dave Deacon and our Extension small grain specialist, Dr. Amanda Silva.
Last time we were out in a wheat field with Amanda, it was icy, it was windy, it was cold, it was snowy, but this week it's actually a lot nicer, and it's the beginning of really the growing season for the wheat crop.
Yeah, so as you can see, it's this field at least is much better than what we expected. Basically what we are seeing here, it's more like a cosmetic leaf tip burn, cosmetic damage, that's how we would call. But of course we would need a few more days or weeks to fully assess the potential damage of this freeze on the overall wheat crop in the state.
So really we're in kind of better shape than what we may have thought as far as coming out of the possibility of some pretty hard freeze damage there. What have you seen across the state?
So basically what I am hearing, it's more of this leaf tip burn, but some locations didn't get as much as the snow or got that snow drifted, and those wheats that were planted late were a little smaller than this, for example, so they were maybe in a tougher situation. But as of now, we cannot really estimate the potential damage, but we have basically two scenarios: that wheat that was well developed and maybe was getting close to reaching that first hollow stem when the freeze came in, and it looks good. I mean, it's overall, right, it's going to be on a field by field cases, but it's better than what I expected, what I am hearing at least. And that wheat that it was planted late, it is a little bit smaller, so that's the wheat that we are going to be watching closely to see whether he suffered much or not.
And with that, the growing point was a lot of times under the ground, but with the first hollow stem, that's going to start coming out of the ground. And what should producers be doing right now?
Yeah, so right now it's a good time to start scouting for that first hollow stem. So a lot of factors will influence the onset of first hollow stem. For example, varieties can differ as much as 3 weeks in the onset of first hollow stem. So we have seen here that some varieties are already past that threshold, and some varieties are getting into that threshold now. And with days like this, I think the wheat's going to start taking off. So it's good. It's a good practice going out in the field, maybe checking in the edge of their fields, wheat that has not been grazed, split it and try to look for the developing head. They're intending to take that crop for yield. We have seen, our research has shown that grazing past first hollow stem can have an impact in as much as 5% of yield loss per day. So it depends on the growing conditions. It can vary from 1 to 5%.
Whenever it comes to what producers need to be thinking about moving forward, what advice do you have for them?
So I think I think we still have a good yield potential in our crop, at least from what I'm hearing and seeing. So just continue with that top dressing plans, start scouting for diseases as we enter in the growing season. And in some fields that are in that iffy situation, if they don't know yet about the potential impact of that freeze, split up stems and look for the developing head.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Amanda Silva, Extension Small Grain Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Welcome to the Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. Spring is just around the corner, and with it will come some unwelcome visitors to Oklahoma crops. One of these critters will be the alfalfa weevil, an important insect pest to one of the state's forage crops. The alfalfa weevil is an interesting insect in that the adult lays its eggs in the fall and winter months and hides or estivates in the summer. These eggs require a certain number of heat units, about 150, before they begin hatching. This alfalfa weevil heat unit map for earlier this week shows some red colors that indicates hatching should have begun in the southern counties. Scouting for the insect larvae should begin now, at least in the southern third of the state. This year could be interesting on alfalfa weevils due to the excessive cold air that we received a few weeks ago. This graph is the accumulation of heat units at Chickasha. Notice the flat red line where the cold air stopped alfalfa weevil development for 2 weeks. It looks like winter is losing its grip on the state as the red colors on this map means warmer than normal air is forecasted for the state next week. Gary is up next with the latest rainfall maps.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, the first week of meteorological spring, which runs from March through to the end of May, got off to a pretty glorious start compared to what we had in February. We do have some problems with the drought monitor, however, and we are going to take a look ahead, so let's get right to it. Well, we got some good news on the drought monitor, and we got some bad news. It seems it's that way every week. Down in south central Oklahoma, we did get rid of a little bit of moderate drought, but we added a little bit of moderate drought, so it was a give and take there. And then in the southwest, we got rid of some of the extreme drought, that red color. So it was a good week for that area. But up in the far northwest, in the northwestern panhandle, we got more of that extreme drought in the red area. So again, a little bit of give and take, as it is each week, it appears, with the U.S. Drought Monitor for Oklahoma. Now we can see some of the problem, but some of the cure as well, and we look at the last 30 days. And this includes some of that snowfall from the big Arctic outbreak during February. We got some good, decent moisture down in the far southeast and also parts of south central Oklahoma. That's where we had a little bit of improvement. Also some decent moisture in the far southwest, a little bit of improvement there. And then in the far northwestern part of the Oklahoma Panhandle, 19/100ths of an inch of rain or liquid equivalent moisture. So that didn't lend to any improvements, and that's where we got the actually degradation into the extreme drought category. We see increased odds of above normal temperatures across the entire state, but especially the southwestern portions of Oklahoma. We see increased odds of below normal precipitation across the entire state, save for the far eastern sections. But those increased odds are increased in the western panhandle and the western half of the state. So any moisture we get through the next couple of weeks will help curtail some of that drought expansion in the northwest, also down in south central Oklahoma, and maybe help improve it in other places. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Well, earlier in the show, Amanda talked about first hollow stem. So Brian, how does first hollow stem impact top dressing as producers are moving into March?
So it's a great question. What hollow stem is a growth stage. It's when we start getting that growing point above the soil surface. So one of the biggest aspects is that when we drive over the crop after hollow stem, we damage the plant. We actually can have yield loss in the area that we drive over. So we have to move from wider tire equipment to narrow tire if we're going to apply after hollow stem. Also, historically, hollow stem's been that last point at which you want to fertilize the crop. We want to get all of our nutrients on by that point so we don't have to go back over. With the change in production methods and as we apply fungicides and we're over the crop more now, that's not quite as sensitive as it was because now we have our wider sprayer. So we can fertilize after hollow stem. In fact, we've seen that fertilization post hollow stem has a good return on investment, positive nitrogen use efficiency, and still results in good grain yield. So it's one of those things, keep in mind that we want to have majority of our nutrients on by hollow stem or soon after, but it's really the hollow stem transitions what kind of machinery can be and should be on the field after you hit that point of hollow stem.
So, like I mentioned, March is kind of moving along. This crop's going to start coming up really fast. After they get that initial, top dress on, or even managing the crop after it's starting to come up, what's some other things that they can, need to keep an eye on as this crop's going to be, sprouting out of the ground?
Yeah, we're really going to be blowing up. As they say in the corn belt, you're going to hear it growing. We're really going to start really moving forward and progressing quickly. So it's still the time, even if we're at or a little bit after hollow stem, we still need to watch our crop. We still need to look for it to tell us that something's happening. So go out and scout, because at that point, the post hollow stem is when we have the fastest period of growth. That's when our growth model really goes exponential and we just start growing really quickly. So we need to be looking for nutrient deficiency symptoms. nitrogen deficiency, so our lower canopy yellowing out, sulfur deficiency, our top of our canopy starting to yellow out. Those things we can treat in season. That's also a great opportunity to be watching enriched strips. And you know what, even if you plan to fully fertilize right now, you can still apply an enriched strip today as this goes out and use it for late season, because if you start seeing deficiencies closer to flag leaf, then we can start asking ourselves, do we want to make an application that is focused on protein? By flag leaf, we're away from the yield. We're not trying to recover yield really anymore, but we can start managing for quality. So maybe you have a nitrogen-rich strip and a sulfur-rich strip in your field, so that end of season, you're making a kind of a judgment call on whether you top off the crop to go from 11 or 12% protein to 12 to 13% protein.
Now, is there like a point of no return in there for, after that flag leaf period for, the protein aspect?
So the protein really is, the point of no return is really flag leaf. So prior to flag leaf, we have opportunity for grain yield. Post flag leaf, we start improving our protein yields. Flag leaf is like a no man's zone where it's like a teeter-totter. It can go one way, it can go the other, it might not really do much. So really protein, our best results come from a really late application at the time where the head's out and you're getting close to anthesis, meaning that plant's flowering. That way you get nitrogen on the awns. Nitrogen is actually transferring from the awns into the berries. So that's when we get some of our best protein. So really no man's land is flag leaf. And we want yield to go in before flag leaf, and we want protein to come in after flag leaf.
Before we let you go, and it's kind of crazy that, summer's just right around the corner, so let's switch to summer crops really quick. What are some things that producers need to be keeping an eye out in, their plots?
Right now it's planting time, right? Let's get everything ready so that our establishment and everything's set to go. Planting means soil sampling. Planting means ground preparation. So we're kind of late in the hole for lime. I mean, we can get lime on, but don't expect full effect by the time you plant your soybean, corn, or sorghum, your summer crop. But right now it's the time, if you don't have your soil samples, get out there, get a soil sample to make sure you have phosphorus and potassium and all your nutrients ready to go. You want that P and K ready for the crop to go so it gets the best start, starts the best root, and you go on for a full season.
Well, spring sure is busy for Oklahoma.
It is.
All right, thanks, Brian. If you'd like some more information about what Brian talked about, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Good morning, Oklahoma. I'm Mark Johnson, and this week's topic, as we look ahead to breeding season, hard to believe that breeding season is upon us since we were suffering from such brutal cold temperatures just a few days ago. But if we intend to start calving next January, April is going to be when bull turnout occurs. We typically say that there are three objectives of any breeding season. Number one, we want to get as many cows bred as early in the breeding season as possible. Number two, we want to get cows bred to bulls with as much genetic potential as possible. And the third thing is to accomplish this as economically as we possibly can. If we can get cows settled on their first estrus cycle of the breeding season, the result is that following calving and weaning season, we're going to wean off heavier calves with more pay weight. For example, if we miss one heat cycle on a cow, that 21 days that we miss results in a calf that the following year is going to wean off about 40 to 50 pounds lighter. If we spread that over a few cows in a cow herd, the financial losses begin to add up to us pretty quick. So this week's topic is more how do we accomplish that first objective in getting cows bred as early in the breeding season as possible. And in order to address that, I think it's important to think about what should we expect bulls to do, and particularly as we think about turning out bulls, relative to the age of a bull, what's the expectation of how many cows he should be able to settle. So our general rules of thumb, if we're turning out a 12-month-old bull, we should expect him to be able to cover about 12 cows in a defined breeding season. 18-month-old bull should be able to cover 18 or 19. As we get out to bulls that are a full 2 years of age, we should expect them to cover up to 25 cows. And as we move beyond that and think about mature bulls, it's realistic to think that a bull in their prime of life is going to cover 25 to 35 cows for us in a breeding season. But the reality is that bulls are going to be more likely to break down and potentially have some sort of problem as we get beyond 6 years of age. We in Oklahoma realize we have been through some Arctic temperatures when bulls were lying down and resting on frozen ground for extended periods. We always recommend a breeding soundness exam on bulls prior to turnout. This year, as we think about going into spring breeding season 2021, I believe breeding soundness exams are going to be more critical than ever. If we're going to be turning out bulls in multi-sire pastures, it's important that we mix those bulls prior to breeding season or as early prior to breeding season as possible. It allows those bulls to actually establish a pecking order, a hierarchy, if you will. If you've got bulls that are potentially going to fight and get injured, it permits you enough time to be replacing those prior to breeding season and bull turnout, as opposed to that happening inside of breeding season when bulls get injured and they're not covering cows, another thing that can spell financial disaster. Next week's topic, we'll be addressing topic number 2, and how do we identify the genetically important traits for our particular operation, our particular marketing endpoint for a set of calves, and the cow herd that we've got. Look forward to visiting with you next week.
We're joined now by our Ag Policy Specialist, Dr. Amy Hagerman, to talk a little bit about ARC and PLC. Amy, an important deadline just around the corner.
Yeah, March 15th is the last day to both re-elect and enroll in either ARC or PLC for crop base in Oklahoma. This is the first time producers have had a chance to actually change their election midstream in a farm bill. It was a change in the 2018 farm bill. There was some concern in the last farm bill that as crop prices changed, people didn't have a chance to adjust to what was happening in the market. So especially given what we've seen in the market now, this is an important opportunity for people.
So for those who are considering changing, what kind of factors should they look at as they weigh that decision?
Yeah, I think you really have to come back to the purpose of the two programs. So the two programs are the Price Loss Coverage Program and the Agricultural Risk Coverage Program. So for PLC, when the national marketing year average price falls below that trigger price, that reference price that's set in the Farm Bill, for example, it's $5.50 for wheat, then we trigger a payment under the PLC program. The ARC program is a little bit more complicated, and here I'm mostly talking about the ARC County coverage. It triggers whenever the county level revenue falls below the guaranteed revenue. So we're paying attention to yield and price in that instance. Thinking about what's happening with prices at the national level for a lot of our commodities, it may be time to consider ARC coverage again, specifically depending on what's happening in your county and what's happening with the national prices as well.
So those triggers, I think, are the key.
Absolutely.
Talk more about some of the factors that determine those and what ultimately becomes the payments.
Yeah, so we can use wheat as an example. We've got a lot of wheat base here in Oklahoma. That national reference price is $5.50. So when we think about that marketing year average price, it's the price across all types of wheat, not just our hard red that we produce mostly here in Oklahoma, but across the entire country, across all types of wheat. Now, the ARC program, on the other hand, is the yield that they have on their individual county, and then also that same national reference price. So it gets a little more complicated on how that all fits together. So I really recommend people talk to their FSA office, maybe check out some of the tools that are available online through farmers.gov and look at their specific county, their specific crop, because you can choose a different program. You can choose PLC for one crop and ARC for another to get really down to that decision. It's a much closer decision this year than it has been in the last few.
Okay, Amy, thanks a lot. And for a link to the website Amy mentioned, go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Well, crop prices are still looking pretty good. So Kim, what is the market offering for harvest delivered commodities?
Well, if you look at, say, Medford, Oklahoma, and remember that prices are changing 10 to 15 cents up or down each day, but right now the current price is $6 for wheat. For harvest delivered wheat, it's at $6.25. That's a 15 cent under basis. You look at corn, the current price is $5.25. You can forward contract it for harvest delivery at $5. That's at 15 cents under that December contract. Milo is at $6.90 for current price, $5.40 for harvest delivered. That's 70 cents over that corn December contract. Soybeans, current price $13.60. Forward contract for harvest delivery $11.50. That's 70 cents underneath that November soybean contract. Canola, I don't have a forward contract for it, but the current price is $8.90 a bushel. Cotton futures is at 89 cents for the current cotton contract, and for the December contract it's 85 cents.
So there was some buzz on social media about the possibility of $42 wheat. What's the story there?
Yeah, and Sue Martin said that wheat prices in 2023 could be $42 a bushel. A year ago, I'd said that it's impossible to have oil prices at a minus $40. In other words, you had to pay people $40 to take oil, and for a few hours, we had that price. Now, the real thing is what's going on here and what's Sue basing this on, and $42 wheat could happen. We've got record wheat stocks right now, and we've got wheat prices $2 above what they were a year ago or a year and a half ago. The importers are demanding the wheat. It's a transfer of ownership, not an increase in supply, but an increase in demand, increase in prices. And the other underlying factor is inflation. There's a lot of cash money around the world. You look at the United States, over the last year, over 40% of our money has been created in the last year. So there's a lot of cash out there right now to be spent on things, and people are worried about inflation. And in inflationary times, people tend to buy commodities and store their wealth in commodities. You've also got transportation problems. It's difficult to get transportation right now, to get cargoes loaded and get them unloaded. And you have transportation problems, you can have scarcity of commodities, and that price is going to go up.
You know, we had Amy on earlier in the show, and she was talking about ARC and PLC programs. So for our grain producers out there, what should they, what should they think about when they're considering choosing between those two?
Well, Amy's the expert. Dr. Hagerman's the expert in this area. However, you look at the reference price. So you look at the reference price for wheat, it's $5.50. Right now you can forward contract for $6.25. Well, the odds are the price is going to stay above $5.50, so you probably don't want to go with the PLC. Right now it looks like prices are going to be above that reference price, and so you want to take that into consideration with your decision.
So moving forward, through the entire, for the rest of the year 2021, just looking ahead, our producers or grain producers, do you think there's much of a chance to make a profit this year?
If they can produce a commodity, if they can produce the corn, the sorghum, the soybeans, the wheat, I think there's a good potential to make profit this year. But you've still got to manage expenses, and with the higher prices and with relatively good income in there, we've driven up the price of fertilizer, of all the inputs, the seeds, the equipment. If you manage cost and you can produce it, then I think you're going to make a profit.
It's a fingers crossed time of year.
That's exactly correct.
All right, thanks, Kim. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
So with the recent winter weather that we've had severe low temperatures, we've always got the question is how does this impact mosquitoes? And one of the main things is it's important to know that we have 3 different kinds of mosquitoes that are important in Oklahoma. And when I say 3 different kinds, 3 groups, the first group is Aedes, or those that are grouped into these container breeding mosquitoes. Then we also have Culex mosquitoes that are involved with a lot of different things, including West Nile virus. And then the last group is what we call the Saurophora, that are what we consider the more traditional floodwater mosquitoes, that are the large mosquitoes that you see towards the beginning of the season and sometimes later in the summer as well. And so when we think about the mosquitoes that are important in Oklahoma that can transmit different pathogens that can cause disease, the 2 main ones we're going to be focusing on are Aedes mosquitoes and Culex mosquitoes. The first one, the Aedes mosquitoes, are what we call the container breeding mosquitoes. And they're always associated with areas that you don't think water is gathering, such as backyard gardens, any kind of cistern that can hold a water for a long time. That's where these will be breeding. And they overwinter differently than the other types of mosquitoes because they overwinter as in the egg stage. Now, when we consider what's important for what we call overwintering, it's basically this concept is what we know is diapause. Diapause just mainly means that it's a physiological state that the mosquito prepares for that can occur in different life stages. The second group that we're concerned with are the Culex mosquitoes that we tend to have probably more abundance of when we look at seasonal populations of mosquitoes across Oklahoma. And this group is very important because they're the ones that are involved in transmitting West Nile virus. Now, how they overwinter is important because they overwinter as adults. And when you think about a Culex type mosquito that overwinters as an adult, that means they can find a lot of different hiding places. And they can overwinter in those locations, so it allows them to be a little bit more successful because they're not stationary. They can move somewhat. Now, they still go into diapause, but the diapause is as the adult, which means they just slow their physiological processes. And what we call the overwintering adults, they usually have more fat deposits, and they usually have an extra layer of what we call hydrocarbons that allows them to protect themselves from extreme winter weather. Extreme weather can impact them, but it's usually those in those overwintering states. So what that means is that we may not necessarily see an impact long term, but we could see a delayed season.
That'll do it for our show this week. A reminder, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.